A human hand, clad in a black glove, injects a substance into the yolk of an egg. Within minutes, the egg divides, producing an identical egg. On the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a star for Oscar-winning actress Elizabeth Sparkle is unveiled. As time passes, the star fades, and Elizabeth's name loses its former glory. Now, she hosts an aerobics TV show. Despite her age, Elizabeth remains fit and attractive. One day, when the women's restroom is out of order, Elizabeth enters the men's room. While inside a stall, she overhears her producer, Harvey, talking about how Elizabeth is outdated and that the show needs a younger, more attractive host. He remarks that it's time for her to retire, as her Oscar win came at the dawn of cinematography, and the industry now belongs to the younger generation. Hurt by these words, Elizabeth has lunch with Harvey, who casually laughs about her retirement and leaves with a friend. She notices a fly in her wine glass and feels as helpless as the insect. Later, on her way home, she becomes distracted by workers removing her billboard and gets into an accident. At the hospital, a doctor recognizes her and offers compliments, but Elizabeth begins to cry, realizing her fame is fading. Embarrassed, the doctor says his goodbye and exits. However, a young nurse starts examining Elizabeth's back, muttering that she would be perfect for an experiment. Before leaving, the nurse slips a flash drive into her pocket with a commercial for a product called Substance. Elizabeth reads the product's name when she is approached by an old classmate, Fred. He's thrilled to see her and suggests they meet up to reminisce about old times. Fred writes his number on a random scrap of paper, then dips it in a puddle before handing it to her. Elizabeth pretends to be happy to see him, but deep down, she sinks into a deeper depression. Upon arriving home, she finds a bouquet thanking her for her years of service, which only adds to her despair. The word "was in the note" stings the most. In her sadness, Elizabeth inserts the flash drive into her TV and watches a commercial for the product Substance, which promises to unlock DNA and trigger cell division, creating a new version of oneself. The ad explains that while the two versions are separate personalities, they remain the same person, just an enhanced version. Youthful, more beautiful, and perfect. The two must coexist in symbiosis and switch every 7 days, always remembering that they are one whole. Elizabeth visits a bar and, while observing happy couples, feels the weight of her loneliness. After returning home, lost in thought and memories, she calls the number on the flash drive and orders the Substance. The call ends quickly, and she is instructed to pick up the product from a specified postbox. That night, Elizabeth barely sleeps. The next morning, she sees a newspaper ad looking for candidates to replace her as the host of her show. Around the same time, she receives a letter with a card and instructions to retrieve the Substance. Determined, Elizabeth heads to the location. Using the card, she opens a hidden door in an old building, finding a storage unit with a package waiting for her. Back at home, she opens the package. Inside, the contents are neatly labeled: activator, stabilizer, the other you, the switch, food for the matrix, and food for the other you. The instructions explain that the activator is used only once, while the stabilizer must be administered daily, extracted from the matrix's cells. Most importantly, the two versions must switch places every 7 days without fail, always remembering that they are one. The following morning, Elizabeth stares at her reflection, noticing the signs of aging. She finally injects herself with the activator, only to be hit with excruciating pain. She collapses, writhing in agony, as her back tears open. Emerging from the wound is her younger self. This new version, slowly regaining consciousness, looks in the mirror and sees a stunningly beautiful young woman. For a while, she basks in her new youthfulness, but then her attention turns to Elizabeth's lifeless body. Gently, she cleans up, stitching the awful tear on her back. Afterward, she goes to bed. The next morning, the younger version takes a shower, but she soon feels unwell. She retrieves a syringe and injects herself with the stabilizer extracted from Elizabeth's unconscious body. Feeling rejuvenated, she steps into the living room, thrilled with her new, strong, and youthful form. Later, she heads to a casting call, purchasing a seductive swimsuit on the way. She adopts the name Sue and immediately captivates the producer's assistants and, eventually, Harvey himself. Sue has made her choice. She will be the one to replace Elizabeth. Although Sue quickly warns that she will need to leave every 7 days to care for her sick mother, this wins Harvey over completely, as he believes the audience will love her story. Sue begins to bask in the fame that once belonged to the original Elizabeth. However, the week passes quickly, and the time for the switch arrives. Sue attaches the special tubes to her arms, allowing the substance to flow through her body. Soon, Elizabeth awakens while Sue's body slips into a coma. Elizabeth cleans herself up and heads to the TV studio, where Harvey presents her with a gift from the crew. Once back home, she marks the calendar, noting the days when she can be herself. She spends most of her time at home, and at the end of the week, she receives a message informing her that a new batch of the substance is ready for pickup at her postbox. After 7 days, they switch once more. Sue continues to enjoy her newfound life, starring in commercials and relishing her rising popularity. However, one day, she begins to think about the Matrix body and creates a secret room in her bathroom to hide it. Just as she finishes, her neighbor knocks, complaining about the noise from the tools. When the man sees Sue, he is instantly smitten and offers to help, but Sue slams the door, hides Elizabeth's body in the secret room, and replaces Elizabeth's portrait on the wall with her own. Sue's show becomes a massive success, with ratings skyrocketing, much to the producer's delight. She makes new friends and attends parties, fully embracing her glamorous lifestyle. One night, she brings a young man home, but when things get intimate, she suddenly feels unwell, realizing it's time for the switch. Sue rushes to the secret room and performs an additional stabilization procedure before spending the night with the young man. She delays the switch with Elizabeth, extending her time in control. When Elizabeth finally wakes up, she finds the living room in complete disarray and notices her hands twisted with gout. Struggling to regain her composure, she contacts the substance provider, but they tell her that the changes are irreversible, reminding her not to forget that she and Sue are one whole. Elizabeth tidies up the apartment and watches Sue's show on TV, admitting to herself how beautiful Sue looks. Later, she overhears her neighbor asking Sue for a date, but Sue doesn't respond. Elizabeth receives a new batch of the substance and, on her way out, stops by a cafe, where an older man starts a conversation. He laments that 7 days is too long to wait to return to one's body, and as he drops his cards, Elizabeth notices that one of them is identical to her substance card. She recognizes the man as the young nurse who introduced her to the experiment. In his eyes, she sees that each switch makes it harder to remember that they deserve to exist. Soon, the second version will literally begin consuming her. Frightened, Elizabeth rushes home, bumping into Sue's boyfriend, who, of course, doesn't recognize her. This encounter reminds her of Fred, her old classmate. She calls him, and an ecstatic Fred arranges a meeting at a cafe. Elizabeth dresses up, applies makeup, and hides her hands under gloves. However, when she sees a billboard with Sue's image, she feels disheartened. Her own reflection disappoints her, and she wipes off her makeup, tearing off her dress and remaining at home, ignoring Fred's persistent calls and binge eating to cope with her insecurity. When it's time for Sue to switch back, she resumes her show, but during the exercises, she feels something strange under her skin. She halts filming, and as the cameraman wonders what happened, Sue runs to the bathroom, discovering a lump on her body. To her shock, she pulls out a fried chicken leg from her navel. Furious, she realizes that Elizabeth has been binge eating at home, affecting her body. Sue complains to the substance provider, but all they say is that she and Elizabeth are one whole. Weeks go by, and Sue's abuse of the stabilizer worsens. One day, she urgently summons Harvey to announce that she will be the host of their New Year's show, the pinnacle of her career. Overjoyed, Sue continues with her life, but the excessive use of the stabilizer causes Elizabeth's body to age rapidly. When Elizabeth wakes up again, she finds herself old and decrepit, her joints stiff and her hair almost completely gray. Desperate, she calls the substance provider, but they suggest ending the experiment, warning that her condition is irreversible. Elizabeth contemplates stopping, but she cannot give up the beauty of her second version. Although her body is failing, she remembers Harvey's gift, which turns out to be a cookbook. Filled with renewed energy, Elizabeth immerses herself in learning new recipes, while Sue dominates the television screens. One day, Elizabeth hears Sue mocking her aging self, which drives her into a furious binge. She vows to end the experiment once and for all. On the next switch day, Sue finds the apartment full of leftovers and bottles. To gain independence and extend her time in control, Sue stockpiles stabilizers for 3 months. However, just before the New Year's broadcast, her supply runs out. Desperate, Sue calls the provider, but they remind her that Elizabeth is the only source for the stabilizer, and the switch is necessary. Barely conscious, Sue begins the switch. Her boyfriend hears strange noises coming from the bathroom, but she refuses to open the door. Inside, a hideous, bald woman with a deformed hump now stands. When he insists, Sue yells at him, scaring him away. Elizabeth, now a monstrous figure, contacts the provider, pleading for an end to the experiment. She returns home, dragging Sue's body into the living room and preparing to inject her with a serum that would kill her duplicate. As she holds the syringe, Elizabeth stares at the portraits of Sue, realizing she cannot kill her younger self. Instead, she revives Sue. Seeing the half-empty syringe, Sue realizes Elizabeth's intentions and flies into a rage, beating her matrix to death. Afterwards, Sue dresses for the New Year's show, but during the event, she suddenly feels unwell. As her body deteriorates rapidly, her teeth fall out, her nails fall off, and her ear drops to the floor. Panicking, Sue rushes home to inject herself with the last activator, hoping to create a new version of herself. Instead, a monstrous hybrid of both Elizabeth and Sue emerges, Eliza Sue. The creature recalls the audition and tries to beautify herself, putting on a dress and a homemade mask of Elizabeth's face before heading to the show. When she steps onto the stage, her mask falls off, and the audience screams in horror, calling her a monster. Chaos ensues, and a man decapitates Eliza Sue, causing her body to flood the hall with blood. What's left of Eliza Sue flees the studio and disintegrates into guts on the street. Elizabeth's original face crawls to her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, smiles, and melts away. The next morning, the remaining puddle of blood is scrubbed away, erasing the memory of the actress. The film, at times humorous but mostly terrifying, dissects society's imposed standards on women's bodies and the relentless pursuit of eternal beauty, forcing viewers to reflect on self-acceptance and what it truly means to be oneself.